would love to sort of do a round of intros with everybody here on the panel. Why don't we just go around the table? I'll go from the top left on my side. Marla, you're first. Would love to learn a little bit about you and what you do, and yeah, we'll go around.
Yeah, so my name's Marla Potterveld. I'm the manager of the technical account managers at PlanetScale. We are sort of a database management company for very large databases at scale. And our technical account management team, we sort of deal with a lot of the blocking and tackling, customer relationships, making sure that migrations, imports, and optimizations go well. So kind of jack of all trades for our most important enterprise customers. We do a lot of Slack-based support. So that's kind of our biggest differentiator, which I'm sure others in this group will also be talking about.
Manish, how about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Minesh Patel. I lead the enterprise architect team here at Startree. And Startree provides a managed solution for Apache Pinot, which is a real-time analytic database. It came from LinkedIn, and use cases are typically around user-facing analytics. So we all use apps, rideshare apps or food delivery apps, and everyone's so used to seeing instantaneous, mini micro analytics, where's the driver, what's happening, so on and so forth. Those are the types of use cases that we power. And similar to what Marla said, my team is responsible for helping customers onboard with the platform. So getting them into production, and also providing best practices along the way, architectural help, guidance, things like that, tuning, query performance tuning, things like that. Lots of knobs and dials and very complex things, and we'll talk about some of the challenges later. But that's what the team does, and yeah, Slack is a big part of how we support our customers, because we want to be able to make sure we can unblock them with questions or challenges as soon as possible. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Charlotte?
Hi there. Hi, I'm Charlotte. I'm Director of Support here at SnowPlow. SnowPlow empowers organizations to build robust customer data infrastructures. We help customers unlock the full potential of their data, and our main product is a data pipeline which takes tracked behavioral and other sorts of customer data, lands it into various destinations in a state that's enriched and modeled and ready for analysis. I lead the technical support team. We also do a bunch of support for our customers through Slack. It's a deeply technical product. It's quite a big 24/7 team. And we also run a managed service in that context, because a big part of our delivery model is bring your own cloud, private managed cloud, private SaaS, all of those names. We look after it in the customer's cloud.
It's not just pure SaaS, so you're also managing SnowPlow inside customer VPCs and so on.
Exactly.
Got it. Cool. Yeah, I'll do a quick intro for myself. I currently founder at Clearfield, helping companies sort of scale up support on Slack. But part of the reason I find this group so exciting is because I spent a long time in the data industry as well. Was co-founder at Cubole, which was a big data as a service company, and we used to offer Hadoop and Hive and Spark in the cloud. So it's very similar to some of the businesses you folks are involved in. Yeah, so one of my favorite topics, maybe we'll just keep it a little unstructured, is all of you folks have been working obviously in support and sort of related area services, PS, for a while. What are you seeing that's different about the world today? Why what's changing in support and services and TAM and so on? Would love to get some thoughts from you in general about the industry, and maybe specifically about your sort of current role. What do you find so different, compared to what you've done in the past, for example? Yeah. Any of you, if you want to go first, please.
Well, I'm gonna land with my opener that I've been in support for 30 years now, so I've seen quite a lot of change. And I think recently, for me, the biggest evolution and part of why we've engaged with Clearfield is that support is moving away from tickets, in my experience, and we're becoming, particularly at this end, in this kind of deeply technical space, we're becoming much more consultative with customers. And so Well, I don't pretend to live in a world where a ticket doesn't exist. We
Right.
need that backbone, we need the metrics, we need the tracking, of the conversation. We need it to be discoverable by a number of stakeholders. For me, it's becoming much more conversational and consultative. I think
Right.
that's my primary observation in the last few years.
Right. And Charlotte, where did you what was your support experience prior to SnowPlow? Like, what kind of companies, just to get a sense for what is the baseline here that you're comparing to?
So I started in the mid 90s on site at Exxon Chemical, in
Okay.
one
All right.
engine test engine test labs, right through my real career began at Oracle, so back end database support, server side support, and then through a run of like enterprise integration softwares and e-commerce platforms, and more recently into the managed service, so much more technical space.
And you think even from that course, I actually also worked in Oracle for a short while. So it's interesting. So even compared to that era, again, working with databases and complex enterprise apps, you still feel that the world is still sort of changed even more so in terms in favor of sort of being consultative and sort of conversational and so on.
I mean, I'm comparing my time at Oracle was in the mid 90s when it was
Yeah,
all phone support. So, yeah, everything was like you were having one kind of conversation focused on one topic. And
yeah,
and while we still need that, I think it's really dramatically evolving away from that because support often nowadays is not one-on-one. There's so, and particularly in this enterprise space, technical space, you've got lots of expertise and lots of stakeholders in your customers' organizations too. And so the conversations are much more fluid. There's lots of people getting involved. And I think for me, that's the conversational aspect.
cool, cool, cool.
Yeah.
If
Yeah,
I
I
want
agree.
to add to that, I think she's already like covered a lot of ground, I think.
Yeah. So similar to Charlotte, I started as a support engineer in the early 2000s. That was my first, kind of full-time gig, right? And it was an enterprise software company doing integration stuff, and same thing. Back then, everything was around tickets. We actually had, two people that were responsible for manning the phones and routing tickets to the engineers based on skills, based on availability, and a number of things. And I think we've largely gone away from that. I think the larger, look, I've been in startups for 15 plus years now. So it's been a while, but the larger companies may still be doing support tiering and things like that. Um, so one is, yes, it's become a lot more sort of fluid in terms of how customers expect to be, supported. In fact, at Startree, we do use a ticketing system. So there's a support team that we work very closely with, and they live in Zendesk is our platform here. Um, but customers before Clearfeed, it was funny because there was always this tension. Like they're in Slack, the CSM would say, "Hey, do you mind logging a ticket for this? We'll get back to you." And the customer would have to go find out how to go log the ticket, and it was just creating a lot of friction. The moment we enabled the integration between Clearfeed and Zendesk, it was just like, it was awesome because the support team could do their thing and track stuff and work in Zendesk, create their KB articles out of there and everything. But then, on the other side of it. So I think that has become, the norm, because, within the companies, people use Slack and asynchronous, whether Slack or Teams or something like that,
Right.
to communicate. Emails are also, going away. I'd probably check my email once or twice a day,
Yeah.
if that, right? So I think people have moved to this, continuous flow. It's probably stemming from a lot of things, right? We're used to that even on our mobile devices, rather than picking
Yes.
up people, phone call, everything's about WhatsApp or text and stuff. So I think that's become a very sort of common medium for communication,
Yeah.
and support is, right on top of that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Marla,
I
you
probably
want to add to
have
that?
Yeah, I probably have the least amount of experience. I started like 2012s at Dropbox, and so I got to see sort of like the tail end of like the
Right.
email and phone-based support. And it's just a very different model, right? Like you start to have to scale people because you just
Yeah.
need bodies, right, to answer emails, as opposed to having a much more collaborative approach, which Slack really, really enables for us. We have some threads that get like 600 messages deep. you know? And that's people just having conversation back and forth, bouncing ideas off of one another. And it really feels like you're more a part of your customer's team as opposed to someone that they have to go bother to get help. It's much more collaborative, much more easy and an easier flow of information, which for highly technical products is so important because once you have those technical stakeholders, you need to have those technical conversations quickly, especially in the database space. Like people are trusting you to help them run and do their product, right? Like we actually manage their backend data. We host the data, we have the EBS volumes, or we help them with a managed service. And so if we're not responsive, if we're not sort of on top of it, they know very, very quickly. And we use Zendesk as well. So we do still have some amount of ticketing support, and they're fantastic, those members of the team. But really, it is just a different style of collaboration once you get into sort of the enterprise accounts.
Yeah, yeah. Fascinating. I mean, very uniform observations. I was expecting, some echoes, but not perhaps so much. This is really amazing.
One thing I was just going to add to that, if you don't mind, I still remember Marlo, when you said 2012, right around that time, I think 2012, 15, 20, you know, uh, I remember being at companies, and Joydeep and I worked at the same company for a while around that time. And, the solutions team, we were always, working with our customers in Slack or Skype or, whatever the chat tool was back then. And, every time, a new support leader or a PS leader came in, the first question I was asked is, so how do we get these customers out of Slack and into here, right? This can't scale. This can't scale. And I kept thinking to myself, we have to make it scale. This is the only way. This is
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
just
yeah. That sentiment hasn't completely gone away. I think it is becoming more mainstream, but it hasn't gone away completely. Very interesting. So I mean that brings to the next question that I had thought of was, given the changing landscape, like how do you measure the impact of your teams on the company? Like, there are of course like classic support metrics like response time and things like that. But I'm curious how in your organization, how are your teams um, impact?
Oops.
I think your
Think we're
audio
losing.
cut out for a second.
Um, can you folks hear me now? Okay, all right.
Yes.
Sorry, let me just repeat that. Yeah, I was asking. The next question I had thought about was, how does your organization measure your team? Like, how do you measure the impact that you're making on your business? Like, what kind of metrics you use within your team, and sort of when you interface with like your exec team. Curious about that.
I'd love to start on that
Yeah,
one.
please.
So we're super small. We're like 40, 50 people. So we're not the most strict about our metrics because we don't have that many people to be looking at them. But one of the most important things we found is getting people into production. Manesh talked about that for a hot second when he was introducing himself. But really, that's the most important bit. That really sort of shows stickiness because once you have someone sort of in production running their database with your system, it really, really people don't want to make changes to their database often, if at all. It's a stressful, hard process. People will put up maintenance windows or like downtime announcements, and it's hard, and customers really don't want to do it. And so being able to sort of have like, okay, we've gotten you through the migration process. You did a no downtime migration. You're in PlanetScale. You're running well, and now we can sort of take on your MySQL upgrades, your Vitesse version upgrades. That's the open source we run on.
Yeah.
And so being able to sort of assist customers and make their database a little less scary and a little less temperamental is something that really, really drives a lot of our success.
Got it. So just getting them onboarded into your platform, up and running successfully is a big sort of a goal. Got it. How about Charlotte on your end? What sort of is it similar?
We are a little bigger as an organization. The team is still comparatively small given the consultative nature and the fact that it's a managed service and everything. But Data is my friend at every turn, you know. So we measure every single thing. My team time tracks, we measure all the usual support metrics. So for me, measuring impact, a big part of it is how we can reduce costs and do that in a way that still allows us to deliver all of that consultative style of support, all of that like high level of care that we bring to the managed service and everything else. How we do that in a scalable way is really important. So all of the metrics, or a big chunk of the metrics I measure demonstrate impact in terms of controlling how we're scaling versus delivering what we need to deliver. And I think we're not unusual as a support organization in that way. Every support organization has to do that at some point in their lives. But also, I contribute significantly to roadmap suggestions. We can take all of those metrics and we can help the product evolve. We can help the product become more friction-free for our customers, and we can look at the customer journey and how they move through, because it's a managed service, how the customer moves through every single thing they do with us, in partnership with us or through us. And so as we look at like reducing friction through the product, and a lot of that data comes from support too.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, that's a fascinating topic. I would love to go deeper onto that in one of our subsequent sort of sections. Manish, how about you? I know you have a support team and you have your team that is more on the onboarding side, I guess, right? So
yeah, definitely. So what Charlotte said, on our support team, their kind of tier one metrics are around like exactly what you were saying, right? Like metrics around CSAT and number of the time tickets, or how time to resolution and things like that. And my team, we all roll up into customer success. And so for my team, exactly what Marla said, time to value, right? We call it time to value. We're actually, that's part of our variable, right? That's how we, the solutions architects kind of get paid, right? So our goal is we sign up a customer and, we put a line in the ground and say, okay, 90 days, we got to get them into production, within 90 days. Now, not all customers are the same size, but that kind of, the reason we focus on that is, I think it kind of also goes back to the earlier discussion we had on what's changing and how, customers expect support, but it's also how they buy software and solutions now, right? Gone are the days. Maybe there's still some SAPs and other kind of things out there. Once they're in. And CTOs and CIOs just have a budget for those things. But I think what we're seeing is now customers come in. Number one, they're a lot more informed. So there's a less selling that's involved, so that the shift has gone from the heavyweight enterprise sales to now, hey, let's get them in the door so that lift is lighter. The onus is now on the customer success team to drive adoption and make it sticky and make it grow. So for us, time to value is a big metric. That's our tier one metric on making sure we're able to get these customers launched. The other metric we look at is NDR, but I think that's sort of a one is a leading indicator, the other sort of lagging, where if you're not in production, early, fast,
right,
they're not renewing.
Yeah.
So
I think what you were referring to was the land and expand model, right? And I've also tried to explain this to some of the, I've had chats with a few I've been on similar panels, and like people are like, hey, you guys do Slack with like hundreds of customers. That doesn't make sense. And they're like, hey, this is the land and expand world, right? So you gotta make
you're always
people
selling.
successful, and that's how you grow revenues. And I remember at when I was at Qubole, and Manish was also there, and we used to have these board meetings. And as the company got older, we realized that most of our revenue expansion would come from the existing accounts. And so that started really hitting home that, it's not just about acquiring the new customers, but also about growing the ones we have. And that becomes more and more important as you grow bigger. I mean, initially, actually, we were a little bit more biased towards just sort of acquiring the new customers. And so that was a very interesting observation. So just to delve into that, all of you talked about sort of the collaborative model and the early phase, and there's some managed services elements, there's some TAM and onboarding elements in the support team. So I'm curious how you divide things, right? So you've all talked about Slack and sort of like that consultative thing, and obviously, and as part of that, you involve a whole lot of more people than just support. But do you have some best practices in your teams as to what should go to support versus what requires like consultation and sort of a more collaborative process of those 80 long threads and so on? Maybe Marla, I think we can start with you since you talked about sort of very long Slack discussions. And I know in your domain, like you must also be getting a lot of classic tickets, right? I mean, we all use AWS, so we can file tickets, and so you must have a lot of those as well. So I'm very curious how you draw the boundaries.
Yeah, so we do have a bit of a sort of revenue boundary. So when our initial people who are on the Scalar Pro or sort of like self-serve sign up and put a credit card down for maybe $100, $200, they do primarily email-based support. And
Right.
so those will go through your standard ticketing process. But once you kind of get into the, hey, we might want to be able to page an on-call about something going down, then you get into sort of the more 24/7, much higher sort of payment tier support. And so those customers do pay a bit of a premium. For our enterprise SKU, we basically say if you have a P1 outage, we will be online with you in 15 minutes. And so that's sort of the collaborative support that necessitates Slack. Being able to send someone like, hey, I will jump on your Zoom once you've pinged me in Slack and you've triggered our on-call process, and having people who actually go into the customers' Zoom rooms, help them troubleshoot. That's really that level of support that necessitates a Slack conversation. There's just some limits to email, and that real-time conversation is just not easily doable. So that's really how we kind of differentiate. So our support team who does email is wonderful and awesome, and they assist a number of customers. They're just not going to be getting on Zooms with them.
Got it. Yes, makes sense. So pretty much, in a way, you're describing sort of premium support versus regular support, for lack of a sort of a better terminology, sort of like a loosely.
And our premium support covers basically you can ask us anything from how do we optimize this query to, oh, hey, how do I resize my database? We're just there as sort of partners of the team. So there's not really a differentiation of consulting versus pure sort of support.
Got it.
At least at our size. We've got, I believe, 8 people on my team. So
yeah. I think all these companies are I'm sure like 10 years from now, all of you will be your companies will be much larger. It'll be interesting, how things shape up going forward. Charlotte, about you, yours is even more complicated because you have managed services and support and probably some onboarding all mixed together. So how do you sort of direct different streams to different people?
Actually, we don't, is the simple answer to that. At some point in the mid-late 90s at Oracle, we moved from a multi-tier support system where there was a frontline answering the phones and backline doing the more, the gnarlier tickets and everything, to a single level support model. And I was sold instantly on single level support. What I learned very quickly there was that in single level support, everybody doing everything is a great growth path. It maximizes your ability to serve 24/7 with fewer people. And it can operate fluidly enough that you can serve different specialisms and different time zones without having to double up on any tiers. And so the day that I started implementing my own support teams, and every day since, it's been single level. So everybody does everything, which is, I also understand, a little bit only possible because it's a deeply technical product, and I don't have a great deal of simple answers or quick solves that, so the nature of the support we're providing also actually is a big factor in that too. So the entire team take responsibility for, at a single level, the managed service, any kind of setup. We don't do the implementation side of onboarding, but we do the setup side of onboarding. Obviously, deployments and things sit with my team, and the managed service more generally, as well as all of that consultative product support, which is customers asking questions, needing things done. So everybody does everything, which means that we have to be kind of technical gymnasts. But inside that, people are specialized. People are definitely developing specialisms in a very
Yeah.
fluid manner because of the nature of what we're doing and the breadth of what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I forgot to, add this to the question, but aside from your own team, like I know in these kind of environments, it's also very common to pull in like engineers, right? I mean, you have a
Mhm.
complex problem, you have a specialist engineer on your team. Do you do that? And if so, how do you sort of, how do you orchestrate that?
Yeah, and that's actually where Slack it really comes into
Yeah.
its own, you know. So we can, and particularly with Clearfeed, people can respond to a ticket and it shows up in a Slack thread somewhere without them having to be in the channel because the last thing our engineers want is to be in every single one of our customer channels. So we can there's a nice kind of symbiosis, I think, really between the ability for anyone at SnowPlow to contribute to a
Yeah.
conversation with a customer, but also the backbone of it is always support. So I really drive a culture of support owning the conversation. And actually
Right.
quite a significant number, about 30% of our tickets involve an engineer at some point. And so to simplify all of that and still be able to measure it, the fact that support is the backbone in those conversations, support drives the conversation, arranges any Zooms, make sure we're capturing the knowledge, all of that, and it's tracked in Zendesk, means that the support is the focal point from the customer perspective, whoever is involved in the conversation.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah. Manish, you want to add to, is it yours, Sundar?
Yeah, very similar. So we interface. So that we're at a stage of the company where we're still we're growing, right? So similar to what was said earlier about everyone doing everything, we still have some of that. Obviously, something comes in. Let's say in the first initial 90 days of the customer's journey with Startree, my team, the enterprise architect and the CSM, will have a larger, sort of role and focus on making sure we're tending to the customer's needs and wants, questions, and so on and so forth. And in that scenario, we're actually doing a fair bit of, something that might be a traditional support issue ticket as well, right? Just because we're working with a customer, we see something, we want to debug it quickly and just get them going. So we look at a couple of things. If it's a clear cut, hey, this smells like a bug, let's just, create a
Right.
ticket, just show the, customer how to do that with clear feed, gets logged and tracked, because that becomes asynchronous, there's some follow-up required, so on and so forth. So that's one sort of way we decide, okay, this should probably go into support. Another one is sometimes just bandwidth, right? If I'm in the middle of something else and some other customer's like, hey, can you help me understand why this crashed or why this failed? I want to get that customer support. So, our team collaborates very well with each other. So I'll just, have them create the ticket and then somebody from support will follow up. And then maybe I'll come back in and provide context or color. And I can do that all in Slack and it's all captured. So kind of that seamless, passing the ball back and forth is really important to us. And with engineering as well. So engineering, we it's interesting. We have a setup here. I don't know if this is similar or different across companies, but we have a separate workspace for where our customers are in Slack, and we have an internal, Startree internal workspace. So we don't have too many engineers out in the external workspace. So we have our own internal sort of ways to kind of connect the dots there, right? When we get a resource from engineering to look at something, sometimes they'll hop into, the customer workspace as well. The other big one is SRE team. As a managed service, we do the same thing, multiple types of deployment. We have a pure SaaS, we have a BYOC model, and we have some customers running, private deployments. But the SRE team needs to get involved, quite often, right? Something wasn't configured right on the cloud side, or there was an alert that got fired. Um, so we monitor all of our customer environments, right? The cloud environments. And if an alert fires, our SRE team is the first one to sort of jump on it and triage it. They have an on-call rotation, but they need to do outbound communication to the customer often, right? And so they go, "Hey, customer needs to scale up. They're hitting capacity issues," and that's where my team gets involved. So now you have this sort of outbound coordination of, oh, well, let me go review it. I got to go size this thing and then, tell the customer, right? And so it's actually very, very fluid, right? There's communication happening in all directions. And I think that, yeah, exactly what was said earlier, the backbone of having, a platform like Slack, Zendesk, all sort of integrated helps us facilitate that, which is really important. Joey, I lost your audio there.
Yeah, I'm having some trouble with my audio. Just give me a second.
While you sort that, Joydeep, I just want to pick up on because I think Marla and I were nodding furiously when you were talking about SRE, Minesh.
Yes, yes.
And we're in very much the same kind of environment. I mean, speaking from a SnowPlow point of view, we lean on our SRE team quite heavily, and that accounts for some of that 30% I talked about before. My team does the deployments and the sizing and all of the managed service. We respond to those alerts. We do a lot of outreach in very much the same way. My team is the primary responder for all of that. Unlike your SRE team being paged, my team would be the ones who respond to those alerts initially and then escalate accordingly. But yeah, a lot of the same experiences. Like it is just exactly the fluidity of it as well that makes this such a helpful tool.
Can you folks hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
I just really quickly want to, like, what Charlotte and Manesh have said is very, very similar. Like, my team is the one that gets paged initially for most of the alerts on most customer databases. And so we're responding, getting into Slack, but then also being able to pull people in and being able to work with additional tools that integrate with Slack. So like we use Zapier a lot, so that if someone does a certain thing, like something will pop up in the customer channel. So like our on-call phone number, if a customer says, hey, I'm having a problem at here, it'll post our on-call phone number. And then that immediately becomes a ticket because of Clearfeed. And so we know that that's sort of something that's going on. We're able to track and escalate the incident, but everything still happens sort of like auto-magically.
Got it. Cool. Yeah, actually, that's a really, good segue to one of the other sort of things I wanted to discuss was just discuss tools and AI. Like this is the age of AI, so I presume all of you are using it and thinking about it, or your extended teams are. So very curious, maybe we'll just go around the table. What are your favorite tools? I know you've talked about Zendesk, Slack, Clearfeed, but just curious to get any takes beyond that, even plugins into these systems. And specifically, what like, and we can start with Charlotte. You are the most experienced support leader here, so I'm sure you're looking at a lot of AI tools. I mean, support is now, it's a very interesting time to be in. Yeah.
I have looked into all sorts of AI tools for almost every aspect of our support provision. I haven't found one that solves any of the problems that I have yet. I'm really sorry to be I'm not intentionally, a Luddite. I'm very definitely not, but I have not found, given the complexity of the support, I've not found, for instance, a responder, whether it's something that's generating knowledge for my team or whether it's something that's able to talk directly to a customer. I've not found anything that is able to take all of our knowledge sources and our experience across all of our teams and succinctly deliver a reliable solution or even a kind of a well-directed first response to a customer. So I'm not in the business of giving AI responses either human-read, like either human-filtered or directly to customers. It just doesn't work. We did a couple of little tests and the responses were not perfect. So like I'd rather we invested in the people while we're at this stage where this is complex and enough, and that there is such a kind of high novelty to our tickets and our questions, that high rate of novelty that an AI just doesn't pass muster when it comes to responding to customers. And I mean, there are other AI use cases out there, but frankly, I'm in a fairly low volume shop in terms of ticket numbers. I don't need, AI sentiment analysis. I don't need AI QA. We can do that ourselves, and actually we get. And I've found, for instance, just taking those two examples, sentiment analysis on tickets where customers are saying things like, no, I've tried that and I've still got a problem, which is quite often the case when you're working with customers to diagnose lengthy issues and deeply gnarly issues. Sentiment shows up as negative for those kind of tickets.
Right.
And similarly, when you look at some of the typical flags in QA analysis, in AI QA, it's things around, the number of responses, the lengths of responses, and things like that. And again, I've just not found one that gives me a consistent enough view, particularly given the volumes that we're talking about, to warrant buying into one, both in terms of financial investment and trust investment.
Yeah. Cool. I'll shift to the other folks. Manish, any favorite tools? Anything that's your favorite?
Yeah. I mean, we've definitely talked about Slack and Clearfeed, right? But outside of that, I think so. Yeah, it's interesting. Just kind of dovetailing off what Charlotte was saying around AI. Similar, right? Like we haven't landed on neither the support team nor my team landed on anything in terms of providing responses to customers. And I think when I thought through it and tried to analyze what some of the reasons why, um, one, there's a lot of kind of historical context. Again, because I think now
Yeah.
we're living in this sort of world in Slack where somebody did something on a call, maybe had a conversation somewhere, customer comes back in and asks a follow-up question or has something that was like related to that thing in the past. And I think that's the current, sort of AI solutions still don't have that. Maybe they'll get there, right? But
Yeah.
so they kind of provide a response based on just, what just came in, and then it's often okay, yeah, it's Captain Obvious, right? Like, yeah, that's where the setting is to do the thing, right? And it's not exactly what the answer is.
Okay.
But I have found it helpful. We do use AI, and I like to, one of the big things that we're emphasizing and trying to figure out in our company in total is, it's going to sound cliche, but doing more with less, right? Like how do we drive efficiencies, right? The challenges, I think probably everyone on this call can relate to supporting systems that, that our companies are providing, and the solutions that are providing are extremely complex. There's a lot of knobs and dials. There's a lot of cognitive overload, and, that both for us as well as for our customers, and navigating through all of that. So where can we kind of optimize and automate and things like that? So we do use things like Chat GPT, not just for, knowledge source, but sometimes I just need to summarize, get a summary of, hey, how does this external system, work, right? Oh, somebody's asking me about private link, right? AWS private link. Okay. Oh, shoot. I'm going to go spend an hour reading the docs, or I'll just ask Chat GPT to summarize it for me. That's one example. Another example is tooling. We get in StarTree, it's a distributed database, right? We get into situations where I need to go do something on 50 servers. I've used ChatGPT to write me a Python script, to go do it all the time. And that could have taken me a weekend, or 30 seconds, right? So those are the areas we're applying it right now. I failed to mention this in the earlier call. We do have a product-led growth team that's like focused on free trials and that side of the funnel. There they use, some of these automated answers and stuff through intercom, right? So they're in the product, there's a little chat. They try to man that with people, but again, it's a small team, super small team. And there they try to leverage as much, of sort of AI solutions as possible, both for responding to customers, but also getting insights. So trying to get
I have
insights.
something to add on the whole writing code front. I'll do it after Marla sort of gets her shot at
Go ahead,
what she's doing with AI and what her favorite tools are. Yeah.
I'm going to ditto what they've said. So far, we haven't really found a tool that works very, very well for answering sort of the specificity and complexity because we're getting people's data that they're running queries against. Like, I think we all can say that. And so no one database is set up the same way with the same schema, the same indexes, the same, like, and for us, we do sharding. So the same sharding keys, same number of shards. And so it's just very complex and technical. And so there's not that much that is a repetitive answer. We're starting to see it a little bit. But what I do use AI for, recognizing that I do use it, is definitely helping to write out either responses or things that sort of need to be like an initial base answer and then going and heavily editing that. So like I'll give it an outline of like, hey, here's my meeting agenda. Can you please help me flesh this out? And then kind of editing back from what it gives me. So definitely more on the written sort of management side of things as opposed to the direct technical answers. I haven't found one that substitutes for a MySQL DBA just yet.
I think that's the same for me, Marla. Like ChatGPT to some degree has become my little kind of friend in the corner of my screen where if I've got a quick question or I just need something summarized or I can pass it a Google sheet and I want four answers but without having to create all of the formula myself. It's really handy for just saying, oh yeah, these are the four things, or here's an alternative way of, and I use it as like a little buddy in the corner, but almost nothing on the technical side or customer facing. But for my
Yeah.
personal use, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I really like the responses here. I like Vinesh said, I'm also sort of doing support, as you folks know, like I'm always on the support channels at Clearfeed, and I've been building a little support app for our team because when we get a request from a customer, now we have so many customers, we struggle to even understand what the customer is doing. Some people are using Zendesk, some people are using Intercom, some people are just using Clearfeed all by itself. And so I've got a little support app that I mostly wrote using ChatGPT. I let it write like most of the code, and I have a lot of observations there. I can't won't be able to go into detail. But the other point that I think Manish brought up, and all of you folks have brought up actually implicitly, is these chat tools are no good without context. And so you have to feed them like what Nesh said, like the entire history of what you have. So I don't know how many of you have had a chance to, I know Manish uses the Clearfeed bot a little bit, but that's kind of something, we are working towards where we can take all the older chats you have with the customer, because the AI tools are really good if you give them data. And of course, it's kind of like a free lunch at this point, right? Anything they can do is and that makes you more efficient is useful as an assistant. But yeah, that's one of the things that I think has been a core learning is to feed in more and more data about the customer and the setup, like the schema and the number of machines and and hopefully have it learn over time, what to respond. So I think we only have 10 minutes left. I don't think we have any questions. So I did have maybe just shifting gears a little bit. I know all of your teams are small, but one thing I've seen is that finding good people in support and sort of having a good team is sort of like really important. I mean, that's kind of the bottom line, and people are always the bottom line. So I just wanted to just maybe figure out how you people avoid stress. There's obviously a lot of work and a lot of growth goals in a startup, I'm sure, a lot of revenue goals and so on. So how do you avoid burnout and stress? How do you find good people? What's your secret towards finding good people, retaining them, and making them happy, productive employees?
I'm gonna open with slightly controversial view, which is that I think stress is inevitable in support. Like there is a very good reason that in every support role like that I've seen or like that everyone knows what the dumpster fire means, right? It's like everyone's got that dumpster fire emoji floating around their Slack, and I would be surprised if anyone on this call doesn't use that at least a couple of times a week, if not a couple of times every hour. So I think stress is part of the support role. Like we are in a customer-facing team, which is one level of stress. We are dealing with very real-time, very complex issues with those customers. It's a changing landscape. You can have the rug pulled out from under your feet at any moment by a major incident or by, a customer forgetting or telling you something that they might have been more helpful to hear last week. And the layers of stress, as well as just the fact that this is a reactive role, and being reactive as a human being is a state of ongoing readiness and stress. I think that we need people who can cope with a certain amount of stress. That is going to fundamentally, like the levels of stress are going to fundamentally change team to team and organization to organization and day to day, right? But I think we have to have people who are comfortable with a level of stress, because otherwise I don't know how you get through any support day in any organization without being able to say, okay, I know what to do to move the situation forward. And for me, that's the thing I look for in people, is people who can take the stress and can put it to one side and move a situation forward.
Just methodically work, make progress. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Well said. And I'll add to that. I think, yeah, culture is a really big part of this, right? Like the people, personalities, it's you're dealing with personalities. That was one of the reasons I fell in love with support, right? I studied to be a software engineer, and then I go, I just, it's technical, but I love working with customers. And I think hiring people with the right attitude, the right mindset is a big part of that, right? Collaboration, really people feel comfortable, and the stress levels kind of automatically kind of get tapered when they know there's a support system, right? When they know that someone's got my back, right? Someone's there to help me. It's not just me out here alone trying to debug this thing that, the customer's yelling me about or whatever that is, right? So I think all of those sort of intangible things are really important. And you know, I've also learned the hard way that it's an active process to make sure that is instilled, and you kind of grow that culture, because it's easy, right, to get into a mode where the sky is falling, and everything's horrible, and people feel lonely and isolated all of a sudden, especially in a remote working situation. So I agree with what Charlotte said. I think it's really important to kind of foster that, having a sense of humor, opening up your internal, meetings with a joke or something, something funny that happened. All those things make a difference.
Got it. Marla,
That
about you?
Yeah, that collaboration element, I think that's very, very key for our team. Just knowing that, like, you know what, if I had a rough on call, I can go to another member of my team and say, hey, would you switch me 4 hours?
Mhm.
Like I need a little bit of a break. And then knowing that they would do the same for you at a different day, or like, hey, I've got a kid's birthday party this weekend and I don't want to be attached to my, computer while that's happening. And can I switch with someone? It's just having that element of where people are very, very comfortable and knowing that other people will do the same. That's super key. And so finding people who sort of have that outlook and have that willingness to work and empathize and collaborate with people, which also just make great, support skills. So it's kind of almost like a self-fulfilling, like self-selecting prophecy. The people that are sort of in support and do very, very well are the people that we kind of tend to look for, because they do know how to manage the stress. They know how to be a good member and a supporting partner in a team, and just making sure that your interview process looks for that. That I think is key. And if you can, referrals, those are always really, really helpful.
Yeah, I think this is very interesting to again find a very consistent pattern of answers. I mean, I am really surprised at that to some extent. Yeah, I think we are almost at the top of the hour. I wanted to keep it a little bit fun. Maybe just very quick. Let's maybe go around the table and finish this off with one interesting story, from your life and support. Something that would be very interesting for the audience. We'll record this and share, and so hopefully, there might be people in the future watching this for many years, I guess. So maybe a short story you might want to leave the audience with. Anything.
I have one, and Joydeep, you might remember this one. We had a situation where due to a bug in our software, and it was open source software, right? So Apache Hive, due to a bug, one of the customers ran a command that ended up deleting their data, right? And the thing that I remember most vividly about that, was I was at the time, I think, the key point of contact for that customer, and we saw some chatter. We were actually out at a company event, and we saw some chatter on Slack. Oh, I think there's something going on. We're double checking, but and then 10 minutes later, yep, our data's gone. And so I picked up the phone and I called them, and I was like, okay, what's going on? And the thing that was really kind of that I kind of remember very vividly was the response from that person could have gone, one of two ways. It just, could have been terrible and just been like, hey, this is it. We're tearing up our contract. You can't blah blah blah, right? Something to that effect. But it was these things happen. It could have been one of our guys running, something wrong, and we need to do better at, having redundancy and so on and so forth. And I look back and I think the thing that ended up creating that response from the customer that just lost a bunch of data wasn't the fact that, oh, I called him right then. It was all of the work that we'd done building that partnership up to that point, right?
Yeah.
And to the fact that, Joydeep and our CEO at the time were ready to fly out there and give them a whole bunch of credits to reprocess the data and all this other stuff, right? It was just the partnership. But that horror story I remember pretty well.
Everybody has an RM-RF story, I guess.
Yeah.
Any of you want to close it off? Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been working remotely now for 20 years, fully remote, and which is great, I love it. But one of my most memorable support war story, is it a war story? It's a really memorable experience. It's from actually being in office though, so it's quite a long time. This was at Oracle. It was my I did a year at Exxon on site at the chemical labs. But this was my first true technical support role. At Exxon, I fell in love with the technical side, and I naturally went into this support role at Oracle thinking about the technical side. But a few months in, with very little technical experience at Oracle, it was where I realized that the support culture and the support people were also a part of the thing that I hadn't realized at that point I'd fallen in love with as well from a support point of view. And the one experience I'm referring to was, again, it was telephone support. So I was supposed to wrap up my shift at 5:30 in the evening. This was like 5:19 or something, and I picked up the phone and my heart sank because it's nearly the end of my day, and I just want this to be a quick question I can answer. It's about 4 months into my time at Oracle. And it wasn't, of course. It was like a customer major drama, lost chunks of the database. And this poor guy on the end of the phone was nearly in tears. Like you could hear the strain in his voice at this point and how important this was to him. So I stayed beyond the end of my shift, which was, like I think another part of what we were talking about in terms of the kind of people we look for is ownership, right? You take ownership of that problem. And that's some of the things I think that's an important part of managing the stress as well. So I stayed on the phone with him. The office was starting to empty around me. People were filing out. But it went past 5:30, and one of the slightly more senior folks came along and just started listening to the call with no request from help from me or anything. And then someone else kind of wandered along and started listening to the call. And then one of them knelt down next to me and started making frantic notes on pieces of paper for me to ask the customer and get info back from the customer. And so I didn't understand what some of this stuff was, but I was still the voice on the end of the phone for the customer. And by the end of the call, like 45 minutes later, there was about 6 people and lots of notes scribbled on the desk around me. And we recovered everything for him, and he was so relieved. And I got the benefit of all of that relief and joy from the customer because I was the one on the phone, but I could feel it around me as well. And we all went for a drink afterwards. It's just such a memorable experience for me that people just came and helped and got through a problem. And I'll never forget that.
What a great story. I mean, that's a classic war story. I mean, it doesn't get any more war story than that. Yeah. Well, anything on your end? Maybe from your Dropbox days. I'm curious.
Oh, we've got some more stories there, but I worked on restoring people's Dropboxes and
Yeah.
a little bit on the data side of things. And so yes, there were some gnarly situations where things had gotten deleted and having to restore them. But I actually want to end on a fun, happy note. So at one point, this message went around, and one of our support people had gone to culinary school, and they were like, "You will not believe the ticket I just got," back in email days. Someone had asked just to like see if support was even responding to free users, like, "Hey, what's your favorite waffle and sauce recipe?" And the person who had gone to culinary school got that ticket and was like, "I cannot believe I was the one that got this." And they sent like this whole long description. And then the customer sent back a picture of the waffles with the sauce. Of course, they didn't strain the seeds. So our, chef was like, they didn't do it quite right. And it was just a hilarious, like, fun experience where, like, sometimes, yes, we get the worst tickets in the world, but sometimes we get people who are just having a little bit of fun, and then it just makes the day a little brighter.
Wow, yeah, that's I didn't expect that. That's a very interesting story. I have a similar one. Just recently, one of our customers, Slack is great for like sort of inbound stuff also. People just don't ask you for tickets. They just sort of like they want to chat with you. And so we have got somebody sending us a message. Hey, I really love your product. How can I help? How can I refer people to you? So I was like, wow, this is the kind of thing that only happens on Slack. This will never happen on a ticketing system. So that was a very interesting recent one that made my day, kind of like the story Marla sort of narrated. Great. I think we kind of overshot a little bit, but also we started late. So I think we are up on the time. I want to thank you all for coming and sort of, this is a really great chat. And, I'm sure we'll sort of share it in our community and also sort of write it up on a blog and so on. Thank you so much. And, we'll just wrap it up. Have a great day.